The Clear Signal with Steve Vischer is produced in the first instance as a radio show, and it's aired on stations around Australia. Due to music licensing restrictions, copyright-protected music tracks in this podcast edition have either been replaced with royalty-free alternatives or removed entirely.
The Clear Signal with Steve Vischer.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Welcome, folks. Welcome back to The Clear Signal. Wherever you're listening around Australia, great to have you with us for another hour of great fun and great conversation. And as always, looking forward to touching on a couple of really interesting topics this week. Clearsignal.com.au, of course, is the website. There you'll find all about me, where you can find the show. And, of course, you can also catch up on back editions if you might have missed some. You think, oh, gee, what's this show about? Well, you can go back and listen to all previous editions there. Just look on the editions tab. Now, coming up this week, well, you may have noticed just over in the United States recently, there was a bit of an election going on. And there were some results there that, depending on your point of view, were expected or not expected. And, of course, people come down on either side of whether they might be happy about the result or whether they're not. Seems to be polar opposites in opinions there. We don't really want to talk about that this week. What has happened is what's happened, and we move on. But what I found really interesting was the different media strategies that both sides of that election campaign used, the Trump campaign and the Harris campaign. And I thought that might be something really interesting to explore because I think it may have signified a bit of a tipping point in the way the media works and the way politicians and perhaps businesses approach that. Media analyst Nick Hayes is going to join us to have a bit of a chat about that. Also coming up this week, well, supermarkets, businesses, online companies, they're all looking to find ways to get their hands on our dollars, of course. I mean, that's what makes the world go round, what makes the economy go round. But there's really a lot of psychology that goes on behind that. I actually find that in itself something that's well worth talking about. And, of course, as we come up towards Christmas or really any time of year, it doesn't really matter. There seems to always be a marketing season, doesn't there? Nicole O'Sullivan is a marketing expert. She knows all about this sort of stuff, and we're going to be talking to her in the second half hour. But first up, as I mentioned, we have Nick Hayes on the line. Nick is the managing director of an agency called Media Stable, and he lives and breathes this sort of stuff. And he joins me on the line now from Adelaide. Nick, welcome to the show. Great to have you with us.
Great to be here, Steve.
Well, boy, the media landscape, it's changing, or is it changing? And I thought we might explore that today because particularly in light of the recent US election where we've seen political parties over there on both sides engage in different ways, I think, and using different strategies, and arguably one may have worked better than the other. Maybe that influenced the result. I wonder what you think about that.
It's a great question, and I think, I think it'll almost become a university study as to sort of how each of the parties used media and communications, how they connected with their own audiences, and the result that was actually at the end of the day provided. I think you've got Donald Trump, who is a renowned performer. He will put forward his own position and very quickly dismiss anyone else that doesn't see his point of view. He'll that reference in the very early elections when he first ran, the fake news and also fake information.
I should backtrack too. I always thought with Donald Trump that the biggest flaw in his strategy the first time around was that he went to war with the media, which was never going to be a good thing long term. I mean, when the election came around the next time and he kind of needed to get media messaging out, he was never going to win that one.
Well, he never was. But at the same time, the Donald Trump brand doesn't depend on mainstream media. He's a media house in his own right. He really does control the messaging. And I think that you've probably seen, and particularly in Australian politics, you've seen a lot of premiers and even to a degree prime ministers pick and choose who they end up communicating with and connecting with. They've got, people that they align themselves with, and also to ones that they'll get a better run with. So let's just call it as it is. Fox was always going to run Trump very well.
Yeah, of course.
Fox was always going to support him and put forward his position and views, and that's not just in the United States. That was globally, and for a very conservative. And also to, I would say, I won't say right wing, but it was they position him very well. Whereas left media or woke media, as he likes to refer to it as, is always going to paint him in a different way. So, look, I think Donald, in many ways, was in control of his own messaging and in control with that. And I think, having a crack at the media didn't really necessarily work against him because it just got us talking about him even more.
As the saying goes, even bad publicity can be good publicity, I suppose. Although you'd have to wonder sometimes.
Yeah, I look, and as a person that's worked in communications for a good 25 plus years, that sort of has always been my motto. It's best that they're talking about me than not. But at the same time, the way that he connected with his audience, it was very different to the Kamala Harris Democrat view, where Kamala sort of coming off a very short run. One would say that Biden didn't do the Democrats any favors by taking so long to jump out. But at the end of the day, look, Kamala just didn't connect, didn't have policies or strategies. But I think she was more of a darling of the media, and the media did like her. But at the end of the day, the media don't vote. So it was the people of the United States that voted in Trump.
And I think it's that methodology that I found quite different. I've never really been someone who's taken in a lot of the Joe Rogan podcast, and I know everybody is talking about that at the moment, but I thought it was a really interesting factor. All sides of, according to Joe Rogan, the Trump camp and the Harris camp were both invited to come on. The strategy was different. I listened to a bit of the Donald Trump one. I found it a little bit fatiguing because he kind of wanders off on different subjects all the time. But I listened to a lot of the Vance one, and he came across as quite unscripted and human. The way Rogan tells it, for example, is that, yes, the Harris camp was quite willing to come on, but they wanted to take an old media approach to it. They wanted to control that narrative. They wanted the questions in advance, for example, and all that kind of stuff. And it didn't work out in the end. So one side really openly embracing a new way of doing things, whereas another side trying to apply a bit of old with new.
Yeah, I look, you can't do that. You can't do that in a modern world where you can't control the uncontrollables. I think it's naive. It's almost arrogant to think that you could actually do that in the first place. And look, Joe Rogan, look, I'm not a massive fan of Joe. I think he's got a very strong, compelling position. He's very powerful, very influential. There's no denying that. And he would always probably get a better run. The Republicans were always likely to get a better run than necessarily Kamala, and that was probably her concern. Let's also put this in out there, is that Kamala Harris is not a good performer in front of the media. She did very well, I think, in the debate, but she was only debating Donald Trump. When the issues and when the positioning of Kamala Harris's personal brand out there, she wasn't fantastic. So, that would have been from their media advisors and the people that surrounded Kamala, was that they wanted to get some form of control. I think it was a mistake not to do it, though, because as you just mentioned there, Steve, the way Vance dealt with it and became very human, that was what we're looking for in stories. That's what we're looking for in our leaders, is a more human touch, not this necessarily polished, professional, always on the money kind of approach from our leaders. We want human. And I think Kamala missed out on a very big opportunity there to deliver who really is Kamala Harris. She would have got a great opportunity to do that, because she would have been quizzed from those that don't necessarily want to see her as president of the United States.
Absolutely. And one of the things that Rogan said in the fallout from that, I watched a couple of other episodes and clips. And obviously, he'd had a bit of, flack from not having her on, and he was wanting to get his message across as to why. But one of the points he made, and I've kind of really held to this, because I'd like to think this is what we're doing right now. We're not having an interview per se. We're having a conversation. He said, I just wanted a conversation with you. I didn't want an interview. And I actually thought that was a really interesting take on it.
It is, and this is where some of the great storytellers are missing out on this opportunity, just to have a chat, a conversation. I think people, when they start to look at the bias of the particular media when they're being interviewed, there's already a sense of doubt and also question as to what the motives are of this particular engagement is. When you're having a conversation, just like we are right now, we're just breaking it down. We're actually having a chat. Do we align with that? Do we align with something else? Is it something, this is something we've just learned? Is it something that we've taken away from it? Has it improved my day? Do I walk away with a bit of a smile or a bit of I don't know about that? That's what a great conversation will have. It's a human one, and we don't want, and particularly in politics, politics, whether it's Australian politics, United States politics, they're very robotic and only on message, whereas I think we get our real sense of who they are when we're just having a conversation.
I always found that really frustrating with Peter Costello. He was just fanatically on message all the time, and I'm like, really, man, we should just talk like a human. That's what we want to hear. But
we might have seen the real human element there is when he was the chair of Nine and he bumped into a Channel 7 reporter. There was probably the more human element of Peter Costello.
Right. Perhaps he should stay on message and just be done with that. Nick, I know we're sort of drilling down into particular parts of politics, but more broadly, I'm interested in the methodology. I remember when I first came into journalism, and I did it by way of podcasting. This is back in about 2008. We were outliers then, and we were treated as outliers, obviously. And I often liken that to the way taxi drivers must feel about Uber drivers, muscling in. I get it. Over the years, though, podcasting and so-called new media has become more accepted, and we're even seeing now where we're seeing people. I actually do a lot of work with people from mainstream radio that are coming into podcasting. Are we seeing a tipping point? Do you think this election cycle perhaps in the US has signified a big change here?
Oh, look, absolutely, Steve. I think it happened well before this election. I think podcasting and new media, you refer to it as, I just call it media these days. Podcasting's been around for a good solid 10, 15, 20 years. You and I are talking right now. Even in my catalogue of podcasting, I've got 300 episodes of the Brand Newsroom and 200 plus episodes of the Experts podcast. And, I've been doing that for a long time as my little side gig. But the reality here is that this kind of media is being recognised by traditional media. Legacy media realises that they've got to adapt and change the way that they broadcast to an audience, because we can't be sitting in the car or listening to a radio interview when the radio tells us, or when the media outlet tells us that's where you have to be. It is a consumer environment. It is their world now. We click and tap into what we want to tap into, and we can sort of avoid all the content that we don't want to be consuming. And there's dangers in that alone. We could leave that for another day. But the growth and the development of podcasting and getting messages out, and particularly the niche, not always niche, but also those general type podcasts that have an interest, is becoming incredibly influential, because, you don't have to, particularly we get caught up with how much influence we want to have on people. Generally, the most people that we want to have an influence of is no more than 20, 30 people in our world, in our life. So what is the point of being the front page of the Sydney Morning Herald, or, being on the Today Show with an audience of 500,000 plus, when you're just looking to influence 30? And this is where you can get very, very niche and get a message out very strongly with podcasting. But I guess, with a Joe Rogan, for instance, with an audience numbers that he has, he is a bigger powerhouse than most of the media outlets combined. So, we're talking very, very powerful when you get it right.
You're listening to The Clear Signal. My special guest this week is Nick Hayes from Media Stable, and we're talking about changes in the media. We were talking just before, Nick, about podcasting, but there's also other independent networks now springing up on YouTube. If I think about my millennial children who are now in their mid-20s, for example, they don't watch TV like we did when we were younger. The idea of sitting down to the 6 o'clock news has really gone out the window, and newsrooms, in fact, are struggling. I do a bit of work in radio news. Money is drying up in that sector. Most people now tend to watch YouTube or other types of streaming videos.
Yeah, look, they do. You've got older children. My children are 14 and 12. YouTube is on our TV. It's probably the most hit app that sits on our TV, and it's the most consumed. They wouldn't go out of their way to watch Channel 7, 9 or 10. And the only times they do is when I'm watching it, and it's a show that's similar to what they're looking for. But let me just take out one little thing here that you and I both experienced when we were growing up. We did watch 7, 9 and 10 in the ABC, but we were watching shows like Play School. We were looking for shows like The Wonder Years, years, we were looking for shows like The Goodies or, anything that was sort of comedy, that was engaging in the sort of the youth of the day. And I've just aged myself there, haven't I, Steve?
Yeah.
But
I'd tell you what, I love The Wonder Years, actually. It was a fantastic show.
one of the best shows going around. But I wouldn't have been sitting there watching the 6 o'clock news to then watch The Wonder Years. We only watch news, read newspapers and listen to radio to consume content when we've got responsibilities or when our brain and our lifestyle matures to a point where we're owning a car, house, we're at work, etc. So I love hearing all of that. My children don't even know what free-to-air TV is about. I bet they do, but they just consume it very differently. YouTube is where it's all at for them right now. I can tell you it won't be for them moving forward. So it's just something there that they're at. I used to laugh when I used to read the Herald Sun when I was 17. I'm a North Melbourne Football Club fan. And
we all have our crosses to bear. Yeah.
We do indeed. But back in my time, we were very successful.
Very true.
And I loved reading the newspaper about all of that. But do you think I was going to the business pages? Do you think I was reading finance? Do you think I was reading health and all that kind of thing? No, I wasn't. So, our need for content changes as we mature. So that argument about being on YouTube, look, free-to-air, legacy media has got a very important lifespan still to go. It just has to work with the different platforms and the requirements of their audiences and how they work and consume. And I think they're doing a pretty good job at it these days.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I wonder how one thing that traditional media sources are going to have to do is to adapt. And, I take great heart these days. I am starting to see, as I mentioned, people from more traditional sources embracing podcasting and looking at ways to do that. And, there's another interesting facet to that too, is that people from the so-called new media side, we can learn a lot. I've learned a lot from working with radio people coming into podcasting and learning how to present better. So I think we can all coexist. It's just a matter of learning how we do that. And the question then becomes, for a big network that's worth millions of dollars, how do they keep that revenue stream rolling in? That's going to be the big challenge for them.
Oh, it certainly is. Look, and it's big business. The reason that there is so much stress on legacy media is not because their audience are necessarily dwindling. Their audiences are definitely changing. Their behaviour is certainly changing for sure. The real difference is that the rivers of gold that advertising was once the only place that you could, for instance, even get a classified in was in the newspaper, the weekend newspaper. You needed a truck to carry the newspaper into the house because there was like 4 components of it and it was massive. But these days it's all online and it's all digital. The difference also too for radio is that, there are competing markets for their money. They've got digital and also 2 more targeted media campaigns that can be done in different ways through social. And that also applies for TV and also to print media. So there's lots of different challenges there for it. I think what they are doing particularly well is that they've identified their audience's consumption and how it goes today, and they have adapted that a little bit too far in some cases, and you can see that there's a lot of media today that are doing very clickbait style of content that doesn't necessarily provide or stick with the values that they once presented. And that to me is a bit of a challenge because I understand why they do it because of the competition that they have, but I also think that as long as the pillars of journalism still exist within those organisations, as long as they still hold values, still double check content, make sure that it is correct and it is valid, then I think we've got a very safe media moving forward and one that I think people will depend on. And as we saw during COVID, we didn't turn to the internet for support and help or identify the problems and issues that were going on. We turned to legacy media, and you saw radio stations like 3AW jump from 20 points on the ratings to 30, 35 because they trust that media.
I think the pillars of journalism is an interesting one too. I spoke with Darren Hinch a couple of months ago on the show about the increasing levels of hyperpartisanism that we see in some parts of the media. I suppose one of the downsides too, when you talk about targeting, is that you're getting these channels where people can now go and dial into the echo chamber that they might want to listen to, which I think in some ways contributes to that problem. We really want to, for example, on this show, I try to be broad in the approach to it. I hope I'm succeeding. But the idea is it's not my job to tell people what to think, but I really would like to hope that I can help people to learn how to think.
Steve, it's perfect. You're spot on. You're giving people the education and information to make up their own minds and to work out how they see and fit within the world. I've got opinions and positions. I'm not expecting people to follow those. What I'm expecting is that at least I can present them and put them forward like you would like in any democratic and free society. You talked about those echo chambers, and that's the danger I think that many fall down the path of. And that's not just a right-wing Sky After Dark kind of commentary. That's also too in your left-wing woke ABC sort of in the shadows kind of thing. They all have cracks at each other. But the reality here, and particularly for Australians, is that we all sit in the centre. And when you find media and commentary that actually fits and gives the people of that in that centre something to work with, something to learn from, to be educated, to be even entertained, then you've really hit the pot of gold. And that's what we're all after, is just to do that. I just think that there's such a responsibility for all media, whether it's podcasting, 3AW, the ABC, right through to the Sydney Morning Herald, the West Australian. Keep providing content, presenting it, and allow your audience to make up their minds. Respect your audience at the other end, is that they're intelligent enough to make up their own mind. Don't push it or shove it down their throats like some media have been doing, and also to keep away the arguments or at least the other point of view because they're too afraid that they'll be challenged. And there's audiences that will go down those echo chambers, but I like to think most of Australia sits within the centre.
Yeah, I think so. And I think maybe we saw that just coming back to the US election. I think I used to live in the States and I talk to a lot of people over there still. They tell me most of them seem to have just been fatigued by a lot of the media saturation and the messaging going out, and this person is an awful person, and let's just talk about policy. He probably is an awful person, but can we talk about policy? I really would have liked to have seen some more of that. And I think that cult of personality, we see whatever happens in the US sort of flows out to other Western nations such as ours. So I'm sure when the next election comes around here, I fear we're going to get the same sort of strategy, and I find that quite fatiguing.
Oh, it is. It is fatiguing. There is not a creative mind amongst any of them, and that's not just in the United States. It's definitely here in Australia. And we've got a federal election coming early next year, and wait till after Christmas. Watch the ads and all of the messages that you're going to get that are going to be just slamming the personality as opposed to pushing decent policy moving forward. And I think that was, look, I just thank God, Steve, that we live in Australia and we don't live in the United States, because the kind of budgets that they have to advertise over there, we get bombarded with maybe 3 or 4 ads a half hour. You could try 25 to 30 ads, per hour over in the United States, because that's all it would be. In many ways, props up the media in the United States during those elections, because that's what it is. It's just one big raising of funds just to fund the advertising.
Now, advertising is an interesting one too. When we go back to podcasting too, Nick, because one of the biggest podcasters in the world, someone who really pioneered this, is a technology podcaster in the US by the name of Leo Laporte, who I've followed for years, and I've actually had the privilege of meeting a couple of times. He, at his peak, was the amount of revenue he could demand for advertisers coming onto his network was huge. He's actually just had to really just pull right back and close. He's had to lay off a lot of people and all the rest of it because, to paraphrase him, radio's sort of had 100 years, podcasting has 10, and it all seems to have peaked. I find that really interesting. Do you sort of see a similar trend?
Look, it's a supply and demand situation. And when you've got a popular podcast and you've got lots of businesses wanting to advertise and put forward, yeah, sure, it's going to be highly competitive. But then there will be peaks and troughs. I think, the one thing about podcasting, again, being around for 10 years, is that it's now fairly old. This is not new media. This is pretty much the norm now. Whereas traditional media, radio, has been around a long time and does know its audiences. And I think at the end of the day, any media has to know its audience and what it wants and what it needs. Sometimes when you've got so much excitement around a particular podcast or a particular show, it can be overbearing. And you can just look at that with the AFL at the moment, with all the sports bets companies that are actually trying to completely consume and throw everything that they can at the punter at the other end to say, hey, bet or go along with us. That's big money for them, and it also too changes the direction for which they want to be or who they might want to be. They're the things that can make it a little bit difficult. I can tell you this, Steve, 300 episodes of the Brand Newsroom, 200 episodes of the Experts Podcast, never took $1. But funnily enough, would you believe it, its sponsors are now coming at us going, how do we get to be a part of your program? And that's because they recognise that the audience that we're connecting and communicating with is their audience as well. And when you're like-minded there, they will succeed.
And yet, ironically, here we are, me, who started off as a podcast and now doing radio. So it all sort of circles back when you think about it. Nick, I've so much enjoyed our conversation today. We can find you at mediastable.com.au, and I hope we can talk again.
Good on you, Steve. Lovely.
Coming up after the break, we'll be talking about all the psychology that supermarkets use to get their hands on your dollars. Nicole O'Sullivan's standing by. She's our special guest. Stick around, folks. We'll be right back.
You're listening to The Clear Signal. You're listening to The Clear Signal with Steve Visscher.
Welcome back, folks. Well, of course, we do live in a free market society, and one where good and profitable businesses are really what makes the economy tick. And well, let's face it, these days, the ability to make a good sale is very much a vital skill. But, what is it that makes a good sale? One that not only generates a bit of revenue for the business and gets a big tick in the box for the salesperson, but one that also leaves the customer feeling good about their purchase. There is, I think, a lot of really interesting science that goes around all of that. Nicole O'Sullivan is the director of Bird's Eye View Consulting, and she's very much a specialist in this area. So we're going to pick her brain about all of this stuff now. She joins us on the line now. G'day, Nicole. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Steve. This is fantastic.
I don't pretend to be an expert on all this sort of psychology, and that's where you come in today. But one of the shows that I used to love watching, and I don't know whether you watched it, was Mad Men. Did you ever watch Mad Men?
No, I didn't.
It was all around 1960s New York advertising, and it was so well written and so clever. And I'll play you a little clip from the character there, Donald Draper. He talks about marketing and advertising like this.
Advertising is based on one thing: happiness. And you know what happiness is? Happiness is the smell of a new car. It's freedom from fear. It's a billboard on the side of the road that screams with reassurance that whatever you're doing, it's okay.
I just find that insightful. How does that resonate with your experience with marketing?
No, it resonates so much. It's exactly what I talk about when I do my sales coaching or mentoring with sales leaders. It's literally saying a sale is not it doesn't matter how good your product is out there, because there's so much out there to choose from, right? Like at the moment, there's AI that tells you all the things that you can do to get shortcuts, but there's also, an abundance of product and services online. But what makes someone buy from you is literally how you make them feel. And that is 100% what sales is about. It's not about your product. It's about how you make someone feel about it. So...
Well, yeah. I tell you what, it's a bit of an old show now. I highly recommend that one. I think you would love it. But
I just wrote it down. I'm gonna look it up and watch it.
When people look at marketing, they look at how to position things, perhaps in your supermarket or online or wherever. what are they sort of looking for? How are they looking to get into our heads? There's so many different ways they can do it these days, obviously, but it seems to me that we're confronted with it wherever we go. There's some kind of marketing looking at you, whether it's in your letterbox, whether it's on your computer, on your phone, or in the supermarket.
Can't get away from it. There's lots of deep dive psychology behind it. There's a lot of things around the colours that they use, the shapes that they use, positioning where they put things. There is a lot of thought that goes into where something is and what it looks like and how it pops out on the shelf and where it's positioned on a shelving as well, especially if you looked at a supermarket. Like, why is the Coles brands right at the very bottom of the shelf versus, your high brands right in the middle? It is all psychology of this is what is proven to work when it comes to our buying impulses and how something makes us feel, based on, everybody's unique and everybody has different gradings of their values or what's important to them. But, like for example, we've all, majority of the world has an iPhone, right? But it's going, why is there people that actually camp out overnight before the new one's released and they wait, days and days and days to be the first one to have one? And it might just be, well, in their value set, they have to be a trendsetter or they have to have something that's really, it's important for them and their positioning in wherever they are to have the first one, or be one of the first. So, versus I couldn't care less and, I could wait years and have an old iPhone. But, it is all very interesting around that psychology of that,
They must be actually absolute marketing genii at Apple. I mean, people get really, even the way that there's much been made of the box experience with Apple. I mean,
oh, yeah. Oh, totally.
Absolute
it is.
genius.
Like, it's that the package experience is in itself. Like, I think I still have all of the boxes that I've ever had an iPhone in. Like, I've had probably 6 in my life. But it's like I still have the boxes. And it's like, why am I so attached to these boxes? It's just, I don't know. It's, same as Tiffany, right? It's like the box, once you take the jewelry piece out, why do you need the box? But the box is so special and the box is so, it is all based on feeling. So it's very interesting.
I heard a saying once about sales and marketing. My brother is actually right into all this sort of stuff. He's very good at it. And the saying I've heard is that eye level is buy level. Have you heard that one before?
Yes, it is. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So how do supermarkets work that out? I mean, do companies pay for their positioning? How does that all work?
So and so much research goes into a product as well. So like they'll position it in certain places, they change it around, and then they wait a certain amount of time to get the data to make decisions. So it is all strategically worked out. So, and even when someone's creating a product, they do so much research on customer feedback around what does it look like? What does it feel like? What does it taste like? All of the things all matter when it comes to the marketing positioning. So, I guess from that standpoint, it's not just let's just wing it and throw it out there and see how it goes. There's so much that goes behind the scene when they're, putting things out there. So, like the Kit Kats that sit out the front of the register, like that's all strategically planned, because if you actually looked at it, how many people grab a Kit Kat as they're just going, quickly just scan that and put it through, that just generates millions of dollars. When you think of that over so many stores across the country, like, it's just a revenue booster, right? So it's very fascinating.
One of the interesting things around that I find about supermarkets, interestingly, is the conversation that's been had around bags. Whereas they used to hand out bags for free, now you've got to pay for them, and that's all couched up in the in the religion of green theology, if you like. But in the end, it's a profit center for them. They're doing it. They're giving away something that they used to give away for free that cost them money, and now they've convinced us all that we should pay for this. One of the other things, there's another saying that I was going to record in Mad Men where he basically says, if you don't like what's being said, then change the conversation. I think supermarkets have been very clever in being able to change conversations that way.
Oh, absolutely. And leaning on an emotional response to our place in the planet, right? Like it's kind of going, it's sustainability, play your part, all those kind of things. And actually, that's potentially what help them make the shift, right? It's like, well, we're doing this, we don't want any more plastic bags. You can keep your plastic bags, but if you come to the supermarket and don't have a plastic bag, then you pay for one, because we shouldn't be just handing out all these plastic bags, And honestly, it was clever, and yeah, you do feel like, God, I don't know how many you have, Steve, but I have hundreds of bags, and I go, every time I go to the supermarket, I'm like, why did I forget my bags? But you still.
I have a theory on that. I have a theory that's exactly what they want. They're not interested in green at all. They just want you to buy more.
They're very clever about it. And they didn't make them too expensive, right? 15 cents. Go for it. Like everyone goes, it's 15 cents. But how many times do people forget their bags at the register and go, it's just 15 cents, and then you times that? It'd be very interesting to see what their revenue making is on bags.
Well, I remember seeing some stats on the first year they tried this, and they projected $70 million nationwide in sales. So,
wow, there you go.
If you think of a 15-cent bag, it probably cost them 1 cent to make. So they're doing all right out of it.
Right? It's crazy. But, that's what makes the world go round, right?
Absolutely. So what other you talked about colours there. That's an interesting one too. I mean, how does that play on a person's psyche, and how do they have everybody has a different perception of their own world and their own reality. So how do they use colours and shapes and all those sorts of things you talked about to bring everybody into a common point where they go, my goodness, I must buy that?
Yeah. Well, look, I'll be really honest, it's not my absolute expertise in that space, but I do know from doing sales and not so much marketing, but a lot of sales stuff. It's really around, bright colors like the reds, the yellow, your primary colors, your reds, your yellows, your greens, your blues, those kind of things. Actually, that's an extra color. The primaries are red, blue, and yellow. But they're the kind of things where, circles, squares, fonts as well. So depending on what the font is on the packaging, it all plays a part on decision making. It can be. Yeah, it can trigger memories. It can trigger someone, in their value set as well around what is important to them. Like I said about the iPhone, like depending on what is important to people, so again, it could mean someone picks up a jar of sauce in an aisle to go, I believe that this is better quality based on whatever it looked like, without even turning it around and looking at the ingredients. It's just by what it looks like. I feel like I'm getting a better product because of the way it looks, versus actually it's exactly the same product as the Coles no brand at the bottom. It's just packaged differently, and it's $5 more. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just so fascinating how we evaluate in a split second what is valuable and what is not valuable.
And I suppose the other thing, value is a big topic at the moment for everybody, isn't it? Because times are tight and money is tight for a lot of people. So now we have to look at a way of marketing something in a way that's attractive to people, but also convinces them that this is value for money. This is good value for money. A lot of people look at those no-name brands, but as you say, not a lot of people use them, even though it may just be just as good as the brand name.
Yeah, well, when you walk into a factory where they're making the product and you've got one side that's got the branded product that's getting labelled, and then the other conveyor belt is exactly the same product that's getting, slapped with the no brand, it's like, it actually is mind-blowing to think how much money they make on branding it differently, even though it's exactly the same product.
The Clear Signal.
You're listening to The Clear Signal. My special guest this second half hour is Nicole O'Sullivan from Bird's Eye View Consulting. Nicole, tell us exactly, when it comes to teaching people marketing, what exactly your company does.
Well, I don't really do marketing, Steve. So I do have a bit of knowledge in marketing, because obviously, it goes hand in hand, sales and marketing. I think that there's a lot of synergies that go between the two. But my specialty is sales coaching. So what I essentially do is I understand a business's landscape by actually doing a mystery shop. So I actually either call the store or I actually do a walk-in, and I have my own personalized score sheet around the psychology of the sale. And then what I do is I ask questions. So I ask how sales are going and how's the environment feeling, and are we feeling that the economy is really challenging, or whatever the roadblocks seem to be. And then from there, mention that there's some things that I can do to help remove those out of the way to grow their sales exponentially. So 9 times out of 10, the businesses that I generally work with, we get pretty quick results. So flipping businesses from, a low conversion of like a 5% to 8% up to about 30 to 45% in less than 90 days. So that's generally what I'm able to do by really understanding what someone's internal dialogue is around a situation or a customer or a product or whatever that may be. And then we really try and remove that roadblock out the way and help get a clear pathway to results.
And do you find some common roadblocks? Like I always think that
loads.
I always think, now I'm not the world's best salesman at all. For example, ask a used car salesman. I mean, they always get a good deal, and when I come in, I'm hopeless at it. But you have to have a certain level of confidence, I think, to be in sales, don't you? And I think some people that doesn't come naturally to.
Oh, it certainly does not come naturally to a lot of people. And I think really when it comes down to it is sales is a feeling and sales is a connection, exactly like that Mad Men clip you showed before. It is exactly that. It's about it creates happiness. It creates urgency. It creates that, that feeling of want or need. And I think that a lot of people focus on, hustling to get the sale across the line, and actually the customer feels like a number, right? And so it's kind of going, in a world where we're continually evolving and growing when it comes to sales, it's going, you do not want to be transacting in a way where your customer just feels like they're a burden to your business, and I feel like a lot of roadblocks that come out are, oh, that customer was wasting my time, or, oh, they're just like, they're only coming in to just have a look and then they're going to go buy it online. All of these dialogues that come out, when you say that, it actually creates a behavior of exactly how you're feeling. And then the result of that is then how your customer or how you project yourself for the customer to feel. So it is all internal dialogue around that. So for example, I always have this saying is going, tell me, I just have a belief that I just don't believe that someone wakes up in the morning and goes, oh, I'm just going to waste someone's time today.
Yeah.
Like, I just genuinely don't believe that exists. And so if someone has driven to your location, Googled you or called your phone or sent you an email, at the end of the day, that is not wasting your time, in my opinion. So, it's actually going, well, this customer obviously has a problem and you're the solution. So how are you actually getting curious by asking great, good, deep diving questions and discovery questions as to how it is that you can actually help them to walk away with a solution? Versus a lot of the time a customer walks in with a problem and they walk out with the same problem and probably another problem.
Yeah.
So it's just that what is happening to our services at the moment is quite eye-opening.
I suppose it's kind of a two-way street, and you often think about going to the car yard, and everybody does this, I reckon, Nicole, where you walk in, you just want to have a look at a car, and out of the corner of your eye, you see the salesman coming, you're like, go away, don't talk to me.
No, go away. Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that's particularly challenging for a salesman to learn to have the confidence in that case to be able to make that person feel comfortable. Yeah.
Absolutely. And yes, you do have to have confidence. And I think the best advice I always give salespeople when I'm coaching them is going, do you believe in the product that you sell? And they go, yes. Why do you believe in it? Well, it's this or it's that or it's this or it's that. Great. So we really write down a few key things about what they believe is good about what they're selling, right? And then it's going, cool. So now we believe in the product, because the problem would be is if you don't believe in the product, then you probably shouldn't work here.
Yeah.
And so for a car salesman, for example, it's going, are you passionate about cars or do you just need a job? No, I'm passionate about cars. Great. Well, let's talk about that to customers. Like let's let them see that you are passionate, that you are knowledgeable, and that you are someone that is genuinely excited for them to go on a journey to be able to purchase a new car. And I think that's the thing where people need to separate the KPI or the result or the purchase in line with the actual reasoning behind someone's intention to buy. So it's kind of going, you actually have to be more curious about that than selling them something that they probably won't even want or need, because guess what? You didn't even actually really ask them what was important to them, what was, because I think there's another really good example, Steve, that I do when I'm coaching as well, is I say, have a think about something that you buy today on a regular basis that you actually know you could get cheaper, but you don't because you believe or feel that it brings you value or joy if you are buying something at a higher price. So if I asked you that question, what do you currently buy in your life that you know for 100% certain you could get cheaper if you bought it somewhere else?
Probably bits and pieces for my motorcycle.
Oh, there we go. Okay, so good one. Are you a coffee drinker?
Absolutely.
Do you have your own coffee, or do you go and buy coffee?
Well, a bit of both, actually. A bit of both.
Okay.
Yeah, a bit of both.
Yep. And then I'll always use toilet paper is a good one, right? Because we all had that toilet paper. Do we use the 1-ply or do we get the 3-ply? Let's be honest.
Well, we want the one that's comfy.
We want the one that's comfy, right? So here's the thing. There's so many things. Like, women get their hair done or their nails done or whatever. And you could go home and do it yourself, or you could go and have that feeling of how it makes you feel, right? Like that, I walk out feeling $1 million, even though my partner's probably like, yeah, you probably have spent $1 million on your hair in the lifetime. But anyway, that's a whole nother subject.
Yes, let's not go there.
But I think the thing is that we have to understand that when someone is purchasing something, there is a motive and a feeling behind it. And I think what salespeople are lacking at the moment is just trying to match or understand what that feeling actually is, because 9 times out of 10 in a sales environment, the person that is selling is considered an expert, right? So I could buy it online or I could go and ask some friends or whatever, but what brings a customer actually in front of you or on the phone is because they're like, something doesn't feel right, or I still need a little bit of validation or clarification. And so they reach out because they actually still need your help. And this is where salespeople go completely wrong, is that they start now going into this like, oh God, I've got to win the sale. And that actually turns people off, right? And they're like, oh, okay, never mind. You kind of answered the question, I'll just go and buy it online, which is then feeding the belief of, see, I knew they were going to go buy it online, right? So it's that whole, the belief. The belief creates the behavior that creates the result. So if you believe someone's wasting your time, the result is they're wasting your time. If you believe that they're, just going to go book online, then the result is they're probably going to go book online. So it's just very interesting when it comes to psychology of the sale and how to get people to really spend more time asking questions and spend more time building rapport, because ultimately a connection is a human need and people need that. And if we don't build connection when it comes to sales, then why are you in sales?
Yeah, and I think rapport there is the key word there. Like I think you talk about motorcycles now. I bought a brand new one earlier in the year, and I found that sales experience to be really good. I went in there. I had a particular want. I knew what I wanted, and that particular salesman that I dealt with, we just had a conversation about things. I knew what I was prepared to spend.
He's into it.
There was no hard sell. He was obviously, as you say, he was passionate about what he was selling. And he just let me make the decision, and that's what I wanted. And to me, there is value in that. Yeah. There is value in that.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And when you think about it, that's what people are looking for. And Aussies are really interesting. We don't like being sold to anyway. So like you said before, when you walk into a store and you see someone coming at you, you're like, oh, get out of my way. Like we're very interesting when it comes to our culture of sales. But, I lived in the US for 7 or 6 years, and having a difference in that sort of a culture shift, right? Where it's like, well, they have to work for tips, or they have to work to and so that whole culture of service is such a different experience to what we've experienced in here in Australia, right? Like we don't really have that experience here. We get paid better in terms of wages, but over there it was very much a culture shift when it's like you walk in and you get blown away by the level of, they really generally want to look after you and let you have a good experience, because if they do, their wage rides on that.
Yeah. I know, but you do. It's true though. You do get great service over there. But if you want to go and buy something like a car over there, oh boy, they ambush you from. I mean, I also lived in the States when I was younger.
I think that's just the industry.
Boy, I tell you, we shouldn't always talk about cars. A car salesman will be writing in hate mail to me, but it's
well, and again, there are really good car salesmen. There are really good real estate agents. There are really good, there's some stigma industries out there that make you feel a bit ick, because of how their style is. But there are definitely good ones out there. And the reason why they're good is because they actually genuinely connect with their people, because that is the key to the sale, not your product.
Yeah. And I mean, when I was growing up, my parents owned milk bars. I mean, that's hard work, milk bars, but that's, the old adage that the customer is always right. I mean, I look sometimes with despair at the way some supermarket experiences you have. I know you go through the checkout and you don't come away feeling good about it.
No, especially when you scan stuff and it buggers up, and then you have to wait for them to come to you. And you're like, I can't believe I'm still paying the same price and I'm doing the work here. This is crazy. But anyway, it's a bit frustrating.
That's another interesting thing that supermarkets have done. They've convinced most of us that we don't even need checkout operators, do we? We can walk through and they can save all that money because we're just doing it ourselves.
Yeah, but it hasn't changed our grocery pricing, has it?
It's most certainly hasn't. I feel like sometimes if I go through a self-service checkout, I should be sending them a bill for my labour.
Exactly right. That took me 20 minutes. I will bill you for that time. Thank you very much.
Good luck. It'd be like sending a bill to my local council for me mowing the nature strip. I don't think I'm going to win that one either.
I don't think so either.
Nicole, it's really interesting stuff. If people are in business and they're listening and they think they've got some challenges they need solved, where can we find you online?
Yeah, look, I am all over social media on LinkedIn majority of the time. But yeah, I have Bird's Eye View Consulting website, and yeah, just book a call with me, have a chat, see what's your biggest roadblock at the moment, and let me help you move them out of the way so your sales can start soaring.
Sounds fantastic. Thanks so much for joining us today. I've loved having a chat with you.
Well, thanks for having me.
And that's where we have to leave things on the Clear Signal for this week. Wow, a lot to unpack this week. And I tell you what, if you're a used car salesman out there and you're listening, well, sorry, I'm not in the market. Trust me. But it will be an easy sale coming, I'm sure, at the time when it is. I'm not the world's best negotiator. But anyway, don't tell anyone I told you that. Thanks very much to Nicole O'Sullivan for joining us. A great discussion there. And also thanks to Nick Hayes for dropping in and sharing his thoughts on media strategies this week. Obviously, I'm a bit of a media nerd and I find that really interesting, but I hope you do too. I really think it signifies a big quantum shift in the way people are going to be engaging with the public in the future. And I think particularly with politicians and the like, I think that's probably a good thing. It'll force them to be human. And I think we could all agree that would be a really good thing. Thanks very much for joining us this week, folks. I hope you've enjoyed the show. We'll be back again next week. Until then, have fun, stay safe, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Get in touch. Join the conversation. Find us online at clearsignal.com.au.
Southern Skies Media.